By the year 2030, a little bit over 25%, it's about 26% of the population will be 65 and older. One day, you and I are going to be retired, and there's some kid out there that's going to be taking care of us. But the problem is, there's not enough healthcare professionals. Something has to give. Two things. It'll be AI with a robot.
Welcome to AI in Healthcare. My name is Dr. Sanjay Juneja. I'm a hematologist and medical oncologist, also known as the OncDoc on social media. And we discuss on this podcast all of this stuff to try and keep our mouths above the rising tides that is AI. It has a lot of potential good, things that are going to make the healthcare system, something that we've been desiring for a long time. But at the same time, it has a lot of concerns because it's hard to just stay on a treadmill that's going faster and faster. And who else better than a person that if I were to give the entire background of, it would take the entirety of this podcast. Dr. Harvey Castro is a physician, entrepreneur, speaker, and published author. Speaking of which, I have a book right here, one of his books, that I got to meet at Daniel Kraft's Next Med Health. And he is he is more than every bit of what you think he is, as I've been following him, on the periphery for some time. But he is a consultant even for the country of Singapore when it comes to AI. He does great things in Texas. Somewhere in there, he's an emergency physician. Don't know how he had time for that. He started and launched over 20 businesses and extraordinarily humble. So with all that said, Harvey, thank you for being here. And I'm really excited to have this discussion with you.
Thank you. And it's kind of fun. It's like Dr. Oncology with Dr. GPT kind of meeting together, and let's see what we can do.
That's right. And I love the name. Every speaker we had at NextMed, within seconds made these amazing, toy figures.
Action figures.
Before it was trending. Like you were probably the reason the trend happened. So with all that said, and trying to make the most of the time, the first question I want to start with that I think people don't really have a good understanding of, that you can maybe help frame for us exactly what this entails and maybe how different it is than GPT, is the concept of agentic AI. So agentic AI is autonomous decision-making capability and is gaining traction in healthcare. How do you envision agentic AI transforming clinical workflows and the delivery of care, as well as the safeguards required? And if you can, maybe explain to us what agentic AI is.
Yeah, wow, that's deep. I love it. Jump right in. So the way I see this agentic AI going to help us in healthcare, think of it this way. I wish I could copy you, man. I wish I could clone you 100 times and have 100 doctors like you, but I can't. There's only one of you. If I could download your brain and create a digital image of you, how you think, how you do things, then I may have a patient that I'm seeing in the emergency room and it's 3 a.m. and you're asleep and I got to wait to call your partner that might be on call. But what if we created an agentic digital twin of you? And how would that help? Well, obviously, it'd be very warm and kind. That's number one. But number two, it would have all this knowledge that you have. And the second part to this is you're going to be like, well, that sounds very robotic and very cold. Actually, like I started with, it'll have your warmth and it'll have your creativity. That digital twin would have all the ways you see, view things. And then now when I'm having this consult, my agentic twin, say I'm in the middle of intubating a patient, now my agentic twin could do the same with yours and start talking, going back and forth of here's the medical records, here are the things. And then now I can look at it and now I can see what you would be saying. Now, obviously you're going to say, well, that could be some errors and hallucination. And you're right. And that's where you and I come in again. You would be able to look at it in the morning, look at the transcript and be like, oh, you know what? Let me tweak this a little bit. Let me call him and tell him X. And then me as a doctor, look at it and say, man, this one part, I don't know if this is true. Let me look this up. And again, I can have an agent look it up, do all the deep research, come back with the actual articles, and then I can go back and verify if that's the case. And so that's an interesting way of doing things, but we're not far from that. Literally, you and I could do that today. It's just a matter of changing the workflows. I think I answered all of it.
No, that's extraordinary. So, when we're talking about agents, we're talking about something that I assume gets learned and learns how to do it. So, for example, when I am teaching residents and fellows, I've always I just make them pull up the labs first. And I say, look, I don't want you to get distracted or tunnel vision with anything that had to do with opinion. Let's look at the labs and make a differential, even not even knowing, well, maybe knowing why they're here. And we go through each one and I talk about every indice and what the size of the red blood cell means and the albumin, maybe nutritionally versus inflammation. And I just say this over and over again to try and teach my residents fellows. To your point, that in itself could be a sole agent that isn't just what I think I have a pretty good expertise in on just reading between the lines in lab work, but it can be an aggregate too, of not just a clone of an individual, but maybe like a bunch of minds. And what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying is, Sanjay, this is the way we can scale elements of what we find a physician or a caretaker or somebody employed in the healthcare system to find of high value and scale that individual.
Yeah. And then just to go a little geeky on you, I have my Meta glasses. I have no stock in them. But say I had these bad boys on and I had the API configured to myself or you. And let's just say I created that bridge of that conversation. I could be seeing a patient and you could be sending me the information. I could be hearing it, processing it. And then you could be like, hey, Harvey, I'm up 2 a.m. I know it's kind of late. And I'm like, you know what? 1 second. Again, assuming this is HIPAA secured, I take a picture. I just took a picture of us, by the way. And then I use that image and upload it to you and be like, here's my patient. This is what he's looking like or she. And then you'd be able to take it to the next level. So this is the next thing with Agentic AI.
That is absolutely wild. And I mean, I have to believe that this kind of thinking will make a lot of the bottlenecks, like even in the ER, for example, where you are, like just faster, because like those wait times, I mean, we're not going to talk about the costs and everything, but at least the wait times, the things, the dispositions, we'll have the doctor come talk to you. And that is so nebulous now. You don't know how long that's going to take, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they either have the plan or they need to get the history again. So how do you see that? And how far away is it that in a specific department or part of the healthcare system, we can actually see things happening faster due to agents?
Yeah, you see, one of my favorite phrases, and I'll say this probably till I'm dead, we don't know what we don't know. If I have a new colleague, resident, new oncologist, ER doctor, they may not know the culture. They may not know certain nuances. They may not know that this morning the new guidelines of X came out. Having an agent that is constantly navigating, searching, looking, that I can turn on my phone, put on my glasses and be like, do you want an update with the latest in oncology or latest in emergency medicine specific to your zone? Wow. Now I can learn. Now I can create my own GPTs. Let's just say you and I are oncologists for fun, because I'm not an oncologist, and we're both learning stuff. Now we could create our virtual agentic pool of knowledge. If you say, Harvey, these are the best journals, and I'm like, well, I think this is the best X, Y, Z. And now we create that among us. And now we share that data. And then we get somebody new to the practice. See, that to me is going to help us in many ways. Now let's talk about, not in the politics, but let's talk about the price. I honestly think figuring out the best practices, just like if you think about how we learned medical school, back in the day, if you really think about it, it was all mentorship. It was about finding an elder to bestow that knowledge on you. Now that knowledge, think of it as an agent. Now that knowledge can be dispersed. The second part, if you are doing something amazing in your institute, why not share that with the world? Case in point, if you discover some new way of doing X, and by the time you publish, get it out, and push it out, it may take years. But if we have a way of communicating quicker, now I can be like, let me try that out and let me see. And you know what? Now that I think about it, there's 12 other doctors around the world doing the same thing. That 12 is very little. But then now I can go back and be like, you know what? This is something. Let's push this out. See, and in my mind, that would also help decrease the healthcare costs, because now we're doing things more efficient. And hopefully, we all have that kinder spirit that we're wanting to give back to our patients. So now we're thinking, how can we improve healthcare? What can we do to take it to the next level? And I know I'm going on a sandbox there with Agentics, but I really think this is a huge key to our future.
That's just so extraordinary. I've never heard of it in that manner. I've heard about it for, rote tasks and things that are bottlenecks for other reasons that could probably be satisfied, honestly, to some degree with algorithmic or automation, and less so reasoning. But for you to add this emotive element is something that really permits you and allows you to access, otherwise what's siloed on the unique features of this humanistic element, which is extraordinary. As you're saying this, I'm wondering, have you seen anything about the concept of the patient or the individual, including myself and you, like we're both patients as well? Is there some role for an agent that represents the individual that you have a limited time to talk to so that you can actually now understand what my daily lifestyles are, what I do, what I don't, what my history is, and all of these things? Sure, there's other ways to do it, but if you could actually have a cultural aspect of what is meaningful to me, what isn't, where my exposures are, is that a thing? Like where somebody can just say, hey, I want an agent representative that instead of me saying it 4 times in an ER, all due respect, to 4 different people, and I just have that agent represent that to your agent. Is that a concept, or do we need to do the medical side first?
No, I love this. Let's talk about this. On paper, I've seen this, and this is the beauty about putting two great minds together. We're kind of unboxing things and taking it to the next level, but obviously there's digital twins. Let's pretend I'm a patient now of yours. If I have all my wearable data, I didn't sleep last night, maybe I drank too much coffee, maybe I'm gaining weight, maybe my HRV just went up some and it's usually been this, or my resting heart rate used to be 60 and now it's 80 for some reason, you're like, whoa, that's wrong. But if you look at it from a textbook, that's normal. 60 to 100 is normal, but for me, it's not. So if I'm able to create what's called a digital twin, all my information now, just digitize me. And then before you come see me, just let's have fun. And we have your digital twin have a conversation with my digital twin. And you're able to extract, okay, he didn't sleep. You know what? Last time when we did a CBC, it was this. 6 months later, it just dropped a little bit, but there's a drop. And then let's just go geeky, and the digital twins are talking, and it sees on the transcript that CVS filled pharmacy X, and you're like, oh wait, that's gonna cause some bone marrow suppression there, and that might be it. And maybe when I see him, let me ask him, maybe we need to tweak that medication. See, all this work has already been done. It's being, and not that we're lazy or spoon feeding us, but then it's giving you what I call seeing what we don't know, or seeing what we don't know that's there. And being able to shed light like that, oh my gosh, I really think it's going to help that blind spot that we're not seeing sometimes. Sometimes, unfortunately, we're human and we're tunnel vision. Someone comes in and we're like, oh, it's this. And that's why I love your approach that you just said about the labs, because you're looking at strict data. You're not looking at things that can skew you. One of the first things I learned in medical school is do not let the nurse bias you. And they didn't mean it in a mean way, but it's true. If the nurse is like, oh, Harvey, this patient's come every week, Friday, they just want X, it's going to bias you. At one point, one of those times, they're going to show up with something different, and you're going to be biased. So anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not even like it's any medical professional, because I tell my residents, I'm like, the one doctor, because of time issues and bandwidth, et cetera, you kind of just like piggyback the previous. And then that's why this macroscopic look is truly, I would say, not just like a good thing, but a necessary thing for something that, for beautiful reasons also, is inherent to being a human, right?
Mm-hmm.
I heard it once when I was speaking to somebody about how it can actually bias you in a manner that is bad for the patient. Meaning, if you have a first-line therapy that you've done twice, and this happened to me, and the 3% chance of something bad happening where they get acute respiratory distress, like it's terrifying. It happened to me 2 out of the first 4 times I gave it. And so there's no way I'm not going to have evolutionarily some bias to this regimen if there are 2 other options that are all first line, right? And you might say, well, it doesn't matter, but it could. And I think it's just super important. So I love this concept
and I want to interrupt you. I want to throw this other thing I just had. You mentioned patients, and I definitely have to say this. We're all different, obviously, but we all have different cultures. See, I'm in Dallas, Texas, and if I tell my patient, hey, football was great this weekend, if I'm talking to a European, they're going to say that's soccer, not football. And my analogy may be off. And so to my point, let's leverage AI, not just to say things, but to say it the right way, the right culture. Some cultures, you're not supposed to speak to the woman, and I speak to the man, and the man speaks to the woman. And for whatever reason, let's take bias aside, that's the way it's done. And if you want to deliver the healthcare to that person, you have to assimilate as best as possible to that person. You and I went to med school and we heard about Jehovah's Witnesses and don't give them blood products, blah, blah, blah. Same thing. If you don't know some of these things, you may be causing more harm. And so I'm going to really empower people out there to really listen to AI, see how it can educate them. I'm biased. I grew up in New York City, and I thought the whole world was just like New York City growing up. And I grew up with all the cultures around me and the food things. And so now I can hear people from different parts of the country that don't speak English really well. And I understand everything they're saying because I grew up with that. Whereas some of my colleagues that I'm in West Texas and I tell them, they hear an accent, they're like, Harvey, I can't understand this guy. And I'm like, let me go in the room. Let me try.
Yeah, and I love what you said about too, like the cultural norm, because we know that there is an immediately reflexive and inherent trust and comfort that comes with relatability, but worse, a lack of trust and comfort with the unrelatable. And so if somebody is doing something that is just a true fracture culturally or something that is repelling, you've immediately fertilized the entire soil in a bad or negative, way, which could actually be prohibitive for things that would be fostered really nicely if you would have just gotten it right out of the gates. So I love it. And with that said, I would love to go to our second question, which when we're talking about these exciting things, one thing that I've noticed that is truly a dilemma on which way to go or not is when healthcare systems and medical professionals are looking at AI integration, there's really two options here. Health organizations can either build custom AI solutions versus purchasing existing ones. What factors do you believe should influence this decision between build versus purchase? And how can institutions ensure like seamless integration into existing workflows should they decide to purchase it?
Ooh, good question. Wow, this is a tough one. In my mind, I see it as follows. Some companies or hospital systems don't have the resources that others. And sometimes because of those lack of resources, let's just say lack of abundancy, they have to do what they can. And with that, they may have to go with the vendor that's already out there instead of building their own. Sometimes some of the things that are being done, it's cheaper to go with vendors. With that same statement, sometimes, depending on what you're trying to do, it might be cheaper to build your own. Case in point, let's just talk about ambient scribes. Everybody talks about it. You and I are getting more out of looking at each other and seeing our micro expressions. But if my computer was over here and I'm looking here and saying yes, I would miss so much of that nonverbal communication. Now, some APIs out there's millions of people transcribing that information, and there's a certain amount of money. But with open source information, open source software like Llama models, there's ways of getting that same transcription for less. And having a company, I'm not trying to promote myself, but a company like mine come in and we build it for you, and then we put it on your system, it could be way cheaper than going with the vendor. So it really depends. The second thing is there's sometimes really specific customization that only your hospital needs, whereas the rest of the country that product doesn't really exist. And if it does exist, it doesn't quite do what you want. So there's 2 points there. Number one, when we build, we need to make sure that we have healthcare professionals like us. We also need patients involved. And we also need to make sure that there's a collective buy-in. Because if you're trying to build something and it's not a problem that the physicians and nurses and staff don't want to fix, you may be wasting money and may never be implemented. Second, you want to make sure that that patient is the end user, that they're in the loop, that they're going to be like, yeah, I want this. Because it's my favorite analogy. It's like building a house. You don't want to build the foundation wrong. You want to build it right from day one. I'll give you an extra example. I love this little plushie, but basically it's a plushie that has ChatGPT in it. I'm working on different prototypes of doing this, and my idea is to put this in kids that have cancer. And the idea is I would customize it, put their voice that they like, if they like a favorite boy, female, teenage Ninja Turtles, whatever, any character. But then when that child is getting close to the MRI, it would have NSC and say, hey, we're approaching the MRI. This is what's going to happen. Here's your schedule today. We're going to have chemo at 2:00. Here are the things. And it speaks at their level. So if it's a 5-year-old, it's speaking at a 5-year-old. If it's an 8-year-old, it's speaking at an 8-year-old. And so that's really customized, and why it would be so important for that hospital system to really go in and do it.
That's such an interesting concept. Believe it or not, Aflac has this care duck that's like also meant to provide comfort, and they had different moods that the kid could put on it. And then the duck kind of expresses that with no GPT or AI in there. And it reminds me of the example that, like, I drop off my two kids, 7 and 9 year old in one school and my 4 year old in another. And in my customized GPT, I have for the 7 and 9 year old, about an 8 9 year old level. I say, look, we're going to ask crazy questions and I want all this stuff in 7 and 9. But then when I'm dropping off my 4 year old, I've kind of dialed it down to 5 year old, and I have to flip between the GPTs. So that's just really cool that you do that. And to a bigger point, this is what stresses me out because I don't even have the first idea of what the answer is. But there are elements that you want to preserve and almost intentionally have applicable only to your healthcare institution in some radius, right? You don't want to dilute the same thing about clinical trials today. It's like, well, this cohort isn't represented in the trial population. So now you're extrapolating. So when it comes to some things, you want to be reflective of the circumstances in your geolocation, whether it's fitness, activity, polymorphisms, you name it. But on the other side, you also want to have potentially the information and insight of people with similar maybe genetics and polymorphisms or lifestyles where things that are being done a little differently could be beneficial, because we all know that there is behavioral bias in hospitals as well, like physicians, like you just learn from each other. It's natural. How can we possibly say preserve, if somewhere is a predominant Latino community or New Orleans, our diets are very unique, our lifestyles are unique, French culture, say we want to have those elements, but we also want to make sure we're including different data elements that have to do with, are we practicing incorrectly, people with similar lifestyles? It almost takes both. It's almost like you build and train for certain elements, but you also want to kind of pressure test to make sure there's not a better way externally. And, that's where I think about federated models, meaning where you're able to actually kind of pool all this stuff together. But the key is, again, not to do what we've done with clinical trials where things are misrepresented. Is there a way to be able to actually pick and choose what elements you're kind of testing against the greater data pool outside while preserving the inside? How do you see all of that unfolding? Is it one or the other right now that you have to pick to do it, locally versus like with data elsewhere?
You hit it right on. Federated learning, I honestly think would be the way to do it. And then not to hash over the same thing, but I really want people to really pay attention to it's human plus AI working together to create that better. So let me explain. Let's just say you're in New Orleans and there's a certain type of diet and culture, and you got to match that culture with the people, because if you say, don't eat this, you'd be like, they're not going to do that. That's part of the culture. We need to figure something else. We're going to do our best. And so now that data set is different. Now, if we're able to use that data set, I always tell people when I go around the world is we need to use your data. Forget about ChatGPT, forget about Gemini. Let's figure out data set for your organization. Now I'm training the model, but let's say I'm a hospital down the street from you, then we have that. Now these two different hospitals are training that model, and that's the federated learning for people out there. And so now he gets to get the best of my information, but he's not seeing my information, and I get the best of results from his information, but I can't see his information. That way it's private, but in the middle, it's training this algorithm. Now, where does the human come in all this? Well, now it spits it out to you, it spits it out to me, and I look at that and say, that's interesting, but that's totally wrong. And that's where that human comes in and say no. Or say, I get it, but I'm going to modify this for my particular hospital, my particular patient, my particular age group. And now you're able to do both, is what I'm saying.
And that's an option if you're building it locally or if you're getting a vendor or third party, point solutions or platform, correct?
Yeah. And with that said, there are some models, slowly, they're not on a national level, that are trying to do this federated learning at a national level. The problem it becomes is that some hospital systems, for competitive reasons, they don't want to share with hospital-wide. They don't want their data training another. And so it ends up being really interesting how this is going to play out. That seems a little ethical, but yeah.
So taking that to perhaps another topic of discussion. So as a transition, I would love to know what you believe is the way that AI can actually address what everyone knows, which is the shortage of the healthcare worker force. What elements, how, and what is it going to take? And what's the timeline for that to happen?
Well, I'm an advisor for the country of Singapore, and by the year 2030, a little bit over 25%, it's about 26% of the population will be 65 and older. Imagine that. In the United States, we're roughly around 17% right now. And so, as we know, one day you and I are going to be retired, and there's some kid out there that's going to be taking care of us. But the problem is, there's not enough healthcare professionals. It's going to get to the point where we're going to see more and more people, unfortunately, I'll give my ER example, dying in the emergency room because we just don't have the bandwidth to be able to bring them in. Something has to give. I personally think that something is two things. It'll be AI with a robot. And why do I say that? There's some tasks that are at hand that don't necessarily need a human. Let me give you a real example. Some of my older nurses are like, hey, Dr. Castro, my back is killing me. Can you help me lift this patient? I can't lift this patient. I need a couple of people help me. And it may not be someone that's obese. It's just that as they're getting older, it's tougher. And it's getting to the point where some of these individuals are saying, Harvey, it's time for me to retire. I physically, I'm done. But I'm ready to go, but physically I can't. And so we're now seeing some nurses that are working from home and doing telemedicine to the ICU and different ways of helping because physically they can't. But what if I could bring in a robot next to me here, and then the robot is the vision of ChatGPT, can say, hey, this person's hemoglobin A1C is low. I can see it. Or their voice. These are all things that are true. Their voice is, I'm picking up prediabetes just with their voice. And when I look at the patient, I'm seeing their blood pressure just went up. All of these factors now will have it interfaced with the robot. Now it's powered with AI, doing it together. And I really think that is the salvation. I know I'm sounding dramatic, but I really think this is what's going to help humanity. It's going to help us do that. Now, I know the second thing people say is like, hey, Harvey, I don't like this future. I think I'm going to be out of a job. I need to do a piece on this. I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I keep forgetting. I call it the great shift. If I'm a dermatologist in West Texas, and let me take it back. If I'm a family practice doctor in West Texas, and I'm sending everything that has derm to the big city of Dallas because I don't know, then I'm doing an injustice to the dermatologist. But if I'm in West Texas and I'm using my AI and I'm taking pictures of the rash, and then it's saying, oh, this is squamous cell carcinoma, this is how you treat it. Then I go through books, I'm like, oh yeah, that is. And now I don't send it to the Dallas. Now I'm actually calling it the great shift. Now, the dermatologist is not losing a job. That dermatologist, he or she, is going to see very specific sick patients in their specialty. And if anything, I feel like the family practitioner is going to be able to see more with leveraging AI. And so I think if anything, these kind of tools is what's going to help. Biasly, I'll say the last thing. I'm part of a company called Help AI. We're putting monitors in people's homes, and then you're like, oh my gosh, that's a little freaky, but this is what we're going to be doing. It's going to help with compliance. So if I'm at work and grandma or my mom forgot to take their medicine, the AI would be like, hey, you didn't take your medicine, or hey, she took it twice. And I would get a text and be like, hey, your mom took her medicine twice today. You need to call her and be like, hey, no more meds for today. All of those things, we need other tools. And the last thing I'll say is we're going to make that transition from hospital to in-home care. And we're going to take the hospital out and put it in your home.
That's extraordinary. And it kind of, gives you this idea of continuous longitudinal appreciation and understanding of a human rather than this just the briefest picture or snapshot from how often they come into the ER or how often they see their primary once or twice a year, right? Unless they have a problem. You're just seeing a snapshot. And I would say that about labs too. It's a brief transient moment in what is 24 hours of the day. And I think that's part of the problem is you can only treat so well when you have snapshots and only so accurately when you don't have context. And context and longitudinal understanding of somebody happens continuously. And there is not a single faculty of the healthcare system that really kind of fosters that concept today. And I think AI, to your point, can really help that. The thing that I found interesting on that on the recent study where they tried to, and again, it's nothing end all be all, but AI wasn't as good if I recall correctly, at obtaining the history and the relevant pieces and points that was necessary. So physicians did well on that. And that's where I see this beautiful synergy, whether it's a physician, whether it's a nurse, it's triage, what have you, is the human knows kind of in their entirety of experience of what to go with, when, and where. Then it's the challenging bandwidth problem is really assessing immediately all the possibilities and diagnoses and different, considerations of the lab work with the picture, et cetera. That's how I see this synergy. How do you see it with outside of the clones and the monitoring of something that may be more immediate in the next 2 or 3 years of how it can be a synergistic relationship?
Yeah. I love ambient scribing. I think it should be standard of care where, there's no reason I should be looking away or typing. I feel bad for some of my older physicians. They literally would come on their days off to finish their charting. And I thought that shouldn't be the case. Or having another human in the room typing stuff and you don't know what they're typing, if that's really in par of what you were wanting to be. So I think the ambient scribe is here and there's no reason we shouldn't do it. It's getting cheaper and cheaper. The second thing I want to say is this is the worst this will ever be. So if you don't like it today, give it another test drive. Maybe not tomorrow, but maybe a week or two. You never know. I mean, it gets that much better. That's quickly. I think as we move forward, what you said, and I want to add this, the emotional intelligence of AI will only get better. You see, there's some AI out there that exists that can analyze all my micro expressions. Was I upset? Was I angry? And I've been thinking, sometimes we get so tunnel vision in our diagnosis that sometimes there's little blips that we're not really looking at the patient. We're processing. But if the AI, with the patient's consent, could look at the patient and say, your patient said they smoke 1 pack of cigarettes a day, but it's more like 4. Like you could see it on their eyes. You and I, there's some stuff that we know we ask and we're looking for those small details because we know we're getting lied to. And that's okay. We're their physician. That trust is not there yet. But if the AI could help me catch, or if I'm giving a diagnosis and as you know, telling people they have cancer at one moment, they turn off. You can go for another hour and they didn't hear anything you said. But if the AI can be like, whoa, pause, patient's not listening anymore, repeat. Or let's just take this AI to the next level. Say I'm diagnosing that person with cancer. It's the Charlie Brown moment. And then at that second on, we're recording everything. And then now when that patient goes home, I say, here's this file. It's everything we talked about. And then now that patient's spouse comes home and it's like, hey, honey, what happened? And you're like, I don't know. I just told me I had a cancer and I don't know anything else. But then you can put on that transcript that went over everything. It could be 2 a.m. See, those are the things we need to do to deliver best healthcare.
Yeah, and I think I was very fortunate that, when you start your career, you have a little more time with patients because you're building your practice, et cetera. And early on, I got to appreciate how, especially with something as scary as cancer in a stage 4 setting where people are living years and there's decisions to be made, where sometimes a family member may say something to answer the question because they're usually the most vocal, and you just have to catch. And if you even are able to see them, the patient's face. So I always made sure I could see the patient and the primary speaker, if it wasn't the patient, in the same visual field, that it may not have been reflective of what they wanted, but they don't want to disappoint their son, right? But they're tired or they wanted to make the wedding. Like that kind of play led to, me having to cross the discomfort of being like, is that exactly what you want? And it led to this solution that even the loved one that wants the best for their loved one is like, oh, really? Like, you didn't tell me that. Like, but that makes such a big difference on, the how people die at the end of the day, because we're all dying. People forget that. So I just think it's such an important point you made. With that said, you have been by far, like, I can't even say early comer. I mean, like, you actually broke down the wall and entered this world of innovation and AI when it comes from a medical aspect. For those that are listening, that are like, I get it. I start to see that I will be lost and probably not the best version of myself in the medical industry without learning and absorbing this. What do they do? What does a person that right now doesn't know much? Is it sharing their data? Is it reading? What can they do today to be the most receptive and get the most value from AI if they're a newcomer into the space?
Yeah, great question. I would say follow your heart. Just like you got into med school, got into your profession, it wasn't easy. You had to go all in to get into that point. With AI, become a life learner, just like medicine, just add that to your specialty. And when I say the passion is because if you're not passionate about, let's say, healthcare, you're not passionate about your patients, think of it as channel into that passion to say, you know what, this is going to give me the energy to read this stuff that I hate reading because maybe you don't like AI. But you know what, at the end, what was your end goal? Was that patient, that passion that made you a doctor. And so then use that as an energy force. Now, what to do with AI? Biasly, I'm going to say follow people like me, follow people like you, so that you can get the spectrum. One of my favorite things in high school was when a high school teacher said to me, this is in New York City, he's like, Harvey, read the New York Post and then read the New York Times and compare the two newspapers on everything. Same thing here. Follow AI, find people on the right, the left, hear both sides, listen to some podcasts. That way you make the decision what's best for you and your patients. And I think that is the key. Where to get more knowledge? I'm biased. I love YouTube. I love LinkedIn. I like to see what's trending. So there's an interesting podcast called Hume AI. Imagine you driving down the street and being able to talk to your podcast and say you're an oncologist and be like, hey, what's the latest articles that just came out? And then it'll be able to have a conversation. Then you can cut it off and say, okay, I remember reading that. Let's go to the next. Let's use these things so that you can balance both AI, human, to do what's best for your patients and just get that whole education. So LinkedIn, YouTube, find different influencers or people that you like and read both sides of the story.
I'm just trying to get everything out of you, so forgive me for just
Ask.
peppering you with
No,
questions.
let's do it, buddy.
But the next one would be, what is your fear? What are a couple of immediate fears that you have where AI will get a prematurely unfair bad rap? And when I ask that, I mean, some people are saying, well, this model is only 75, 80% accurate or predictive. But the truth is, right now it's 40 to 60% in cancer of our response time, but 85 is not good enough. So I have that, issue. I have the concern of over fitness where it's performing too well and it's not, generalizable. Or is it an issue of the data is going to be the biggest bottleneck and piecemealing it or finding these kind of revenue ways are going to delay it? What are a couple top of mind that you're like, this is where really it's going to slow down progress kind of unjustly and we need to be mindful and prepared for it?
Two things. One, the culture of medicine. That's going to be always I don't want to call it rate limiting step, but that'll be a step that always will be in the loop. Anything with HIPAA compliance issues, FDA regulations. So those are good safeguards for us because we know if there's an unscrupulous company that wants to do X and Y, the FDA is going to say no, or HIPAA violations or the hospital. And so those are some things that are good for us. Now, how to address the hallucination and those things? Two things. One, the data sets, like I said earlier, will only get better. This AI will get better and better. And then second is, ChatGPT wasn't made originally for healthcare. As much as I did write the first book on how to use ChatGPT in healthcare, there are more models being trained specifically for AI, specifically for your specialty. So a bad example would be Watson was for oncology. They did that years ago. It did horrible. But what the difference is today is the GPUs are better, the CPUs, the data sets, the science behind it. And so they're getting closer to that point. Will they be there? Yes. Now, there's other things that are low-hanging fruit that's a lot easier to do. And that's why we're starting to see, not starting, but it's been there, the radiology, x-rays, and CTs that the AI is able to read it because it's been structured data and they're able to attack it easier. And it's very structured and digitized. So these are some things, and I hope I answered your question.
No, you nailed it. Yeah, these are things that need to be kind of determined. I just also worry that there's just going to be this unfair kind of criticism because of XYZ that we really have to rethink the way our expectations are of the accuracy, the validation, etc. Because again, the question is validation hitting a 95% or is it better than the current standard, right? So again, if you're hitting something 40% of the time in a second line drug or therapy, something gives you 75%, oh, that's not great, 25% is wrong. But I'm right now it's 40%, at best of a response time. But no, that addresses it beautifully. So with all that said, Harvey, what do you want to share with us? We'd love to know what you're getting into. You taught us that you have this brilliant idea of ChatGPT to give children, hope and counsel and speak to them in ways that maybe a parent that isn't medical, would never be able to. What else are you excited about moving forward, and how can people get more of you?
Yeah. I'm enjoying writing books. I know I have 2 or 3 more books coming out this year. So they're all on Amazon. Just type in Harvey Castro. Obviously, if you're on social media, just type in Harvey Castro MD, and that's my social media tag on everything. It's the same. And then things that I'm working on, honestly, I try to let my heart drive it. How can I help humanity? What can I do to help? And so I am taking on consults now around the world for different people are saying, hey, Harvey, we want to build X, Y, Z. Can you help us build it? And I am. Second part is, as a thought leader, I'm enjoying going into different fields. I had a space company call me and they're like, hey, Harvey, can you help us with AI in space and how we can leverage that on Earth? And I'm working with the space company right now, and that's really exciting. And then some of the latest products that I should be launching here in a couple of weeks. I created something called Habit AI, and the skinny is, say you want to work out more, then we created a system that you'll get a call, text, email, what you decide, and then it's an algorithm to help you exercise. And then in that mix, you'll actually get a podcast that you call when one of the calls that you went back and forth, or the email, and it creates like a small database. And then you'll get these podcasts from that information to help you lose weight or help you work out, whatever the habit. And so I'm really excited about making that product, and we're beta testing it right now.
Well, Harvey, it's been a true honor. Would love to have you back. I can't imagine 6 months, a year from now, what and where we've been, even to maybe compare, what we were discussing today and what we see in the world. But I'm definitely a big fan, and I think a lot of us are very reassured with what you're kind of trailblazing and, paving in a very responsible and humanistic way.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate all the stuff you're doing for everybody. Thank you.